college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, staff writer, fansided.com. As you can see, I'm flying solo like a cup once again. My absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com, is down in New Orleans covering the Super Bowl. He'll be back on the show on Monday. It'll probably be a Parks and Rec themed episode. And we may have some the return on Thursday of graphic design is my passion. So really excited about that. Kind of got an abbreviated show here. Got some interesting things to talk about. So let's get started here with our first and 15 with some Big Ten energy. Yes, Ryan Day has hired or promoted Brian Hartline from within to be his offensive coordinator. He's kind of been this title for a while, but now he's kind of the guy that who's the play caller, if you will, for the Buckeyes. And this is a very bold move for Ryan Day because, well, probably the best way to say it is he's betting on himself. This is a guy who won a national title. He lost both of his coordinators. He loses Jim Knowles to Penn State. He obviously loses his mentor, Chip Kelly, to the Raiders. This is an issue. But I mean, like Ohio State's got a national championship under its belt. They could repeat, they may not. We'll see what happens. But for the most part, like if he wants to keep Brian Hartline happy and on staff, this is probably a way to do it. I will say though, all it takes is like one bad game for everybody in Ohio State to lose their marbles again and ask for Brian Kelly and Brian Hartline's jobs. That is within the realm of possibility. So let's not discredit that here. I will say though, there were three other candidates that I thought could have been a better choice over Brian Hartline. That would have been Akron Zips head coach Joe Moorhead. That would have been Miami Hurricanes offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, and that would have been Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein. Again, none of them maybe wanted to leave. So what's Ryan Day to do? But I think Joe Moorhead is kind of limited as a head coach. Akron's not very good. Mississippi State wasn't that good when he was there. But, he had success there at the FCS level at Fordham. More importantly, he had a lot of success there as the offensive coordinator at Penn State under James Franklin and did a pretty good job there in Mario Cristobal's staff there in Oregon prior to getting the Akron job. I think Joe Moorhead's an innovative play caller. I think his quarterbacks flourish in his system. There's a lot to like there, and I think that kind of would have been maybe more in the same sort of vein as what we saw to Chip Kelly. But again, if he left Akron, he's never going to be a head coach again. So, and I think Ohio State would have turned on that hire very quickly if he failed. So I can understand maybe not going in that direction. As far as Shannon Dawson is concerned, this is a offensive coordinator who has been everywhere, man. I mean, he's the Johnny Cash of college football. He served under Hal Mumme. He served under Dana Holgorsen. He's serving under Mario Cristobal now. He's really been very helpful in Miami getting back to being playoff viable under Mario Cristobal. Should have made the playoff last year, but don't lose to Syracuse. Did great things there with Cam Ward last year. Tyler Van Dyke a couple of years before that. Carson Beck is coming in. We'll see how that goes. I think it could work out, but I think there's just a lot of moving pieces there with Miami. For me, I think the opportunity to leave Miami for Ohio State, what that would do for Dawson is that puts him more on the radar to be a potential Power Four head coach down the line. Look, if you succeed as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, I mean, like people notice, and maybe more so than at Miami. But again, it remains to be seen if that's something that Shannon Dawson wants to do. What I would say that is very important is like if it doesn't work out at Miami and they regress and they win like 8 games, he's going to get scapegoated over Mario Cristobal because Mario Cristobal is one of them. He's from South Florida. He played for Miami. He's kind of more of like a machismo sort of guy. He's a lineman. Can't call plays worth a damn. Not a good in-game that's executor at all. But like they throw Shannon Dawson under the bus and we'll see what happens. We know what happens when a coordinator gets fired. It's not good. Like the chances of you becoming a head coach become even less. Like you got to be on that upward trajectory. And if there's like a slip up, then you got to climb another mountain as you go down into a trough or a valley or a dale of some sort. But I think this would have been a fit for like would have been intriguing. I think it would have had a lot of there would have been a lot of success there for Ohio State. But again, you got to convince Shannon Dawson and his family to leave Coral Gables, Florida for Columbus, Ohio this late in the offseason. Again, I understand why that's not possible. And then the one that really would have been intriguing to me would have been, for the most part, that would have been Will Stein coming over from Oregon. Look, this is a guy who's my peer. He played quarterback at Louisville. He's been the OC at Oregon for 2 years now, had been at UTSA prior to that. He may be a future college football head coach and a guy that I think could have a lot of success doing it. But keep in mind that Louisville's not opening up because Cardinals legend Jeff Brom's the head coach, and he's having a lot of success there. So this would have been a move to potentially poach away one of the best things that Oregon's got going for it in helping Ohio State. This makes Ohio State strong and powerful and Oregon weak and powerless. If this would have happened, then I think the chances of Oregon making the playoff go away considerably, and Ohio State's chance of repeating are that much stronger. But again, if you hire Will Stein, I mean, you're basically only doing it for a year because Virginia could open up, Maryland could open up, Virginia Tech could open up. Those are all three schools that I think he'd be a great fit at to lead his own team in the second half of his 30s. But again, I understand why Ohio State did this with Brian Hartline. This is a future head coach. He's going to be more of the CEO type, like former wide receivers coaches like Dabo Swinney and Urban Meyer. They've got 5 national championships between them. Maybe he will adapt. Maybe he will grow as a play caller. But I know that he's an ace in the hole as a recruiter. He's tremendous at developing wide receivers. And I think if he can, as long as he's got like a strong ground game and gets decent quarterback play out of Julian Sayin or whomever it is, then I think that that could work out for the most part with Ohio State. But again, this is a move that Ryan Day is being a little cocky about. I understand that like if you don't promote Brian Hartline from within, the chances of miffing him, making him mad, and losing him, um, they magnify. But at the same time, like you have to be operating under the principle that like he's next. Like you hired Chip Kelly for 1 year because you knew he was just going to use Ohio State to get back in the NFL, which he did. He had Jim Knowles for a few years, but he was only at Oklahoma State for a couple of years before that and Duke. Maybe Jim Knowles gets his opportunity to be a head coach again, but like it's been a long time since he led the Cornell Big Red, his alma mater. I thought he'd be a candidate for, he nearly got the Duke job that went to Manny Diaz. Now he's going to the role that Manny Diaz used to occupy. So a lot of big changes there coming in Columbus, and wish Ryan Day and his team the best. And same with Brian Hartline. I'm a little apprehensive about the hire. I think a lot of people in Columbus are not going to be happy about it, but I can understand why they ultimately chose to go in that direction. Let's move on to our next topic here with some do Hast or do Hast. This was going to be the lead topic, and then Brian Hartline got promoted from within. Also, congratulations, Adam Rittenberg, for getting your X account back and not being hacked because I had to unfollow you for that reason because I don't want to buy uh, NFTs or whatever nonsense that is. But anyway, Adam Rittenberg was the guy that said that Brian Hartline was going to get promoted from within at Ohio State. So that obviously we're going to talk about that the candidates, but obviously I did a little bit, but this was kind of more about that hire. So obviously looking here with some do Hast or do Hast. Cooper Manning went on the Dan Patrick show earlier in the week, and he talked about obviously his son Arch Manning, and he's of the belief that Arch is going to struggle year one at Texas, so as a starter. So, do Haas, do Haas, is Arch Manning going to struggle during his first year as a Texas starting quarterback? Again, with a lot of these, it's multi-pronged. I'm going to go do Haas 1S. Yes, he's going to struggle initially, but do Haas 2S's. He's not going to struggle the entire year. He's going to get better as it progresses. What you have to remember is, for the most part, that Arch Manning only has 2 starts under his belt, and he needs to get closer to 30 to be ready to go to the NFL. This is the Mannings. They're going to try to control the narrative every step of the way. They're going to do everything in their power to make sure his path to NFL stardom is paved in gold, like it was with Eli and Peyton. I can't believe Eli Manning is going to get in the Hall of Fame this weekend on the first ballot. What a farce. What an absolute farce. But anyway, Arch Manning is going to struggle initially because I don't think he's really that refined of a passer. In college, you can win running the football, but like for him to ever achieve all that he can with his last name, his talent, his pedigree, well, he's got to become a better thrower of the football. And he just would run. That's what he did when he was, thrust into the lineup willy-nilly there for Sarkisian last year. And I guess, he did throw the ball a little bit, versus ULM and Mississippi State, but that's ULM and Mississippi State. Didn't really throw it that much when he, went in to replace Quinn Ewers when Quinn Ewers got a shoulder shot up after losing to Georgia in the first half, the first time. But like there will be growing pains. There will be struggles for Manning as a passer. This is just the nature of the beast. He may be his third year in college, but like this is his first year as a starter. Most people do struggle. And I think that a lot of people don't really recognize that. They kind of want a microwave success. That's not how these things need to be slow baked, if you will. But I will say though, like Texas is gonna win, maybe 10 or 11 games as a team. They're gonna lose to Georgia next year in Athens because Georgia doesn't lose at home, and I feel like Georgia's kind of had their number. They may beat them in Atlanta if they meet again. We'll see what happens. Kind of leaning in that direction, but like those are the kind of games where like Manning's going to have to like carry Texas upon his shoulders, and I just don't think he's quite ready there. Fortunately, Texas doesn't have the hardest SEC schedule. I think they do play Ohio State. We'll see what happens. We'll talk win total projections later. Just upon a very easy glance, haven't really dove in the schedules at all. Just something I saw from a bookmaker and everything like that. But as I sit here and I think about it, like Steve Sarkisian needs to make the offense as simple as possible for Arch Manning. And it needs to be ground centric, lean into his strengths, kind of go more of like, ball control, time of possession. I understand that Sarkisian's a former quarterback at BYU, played for Lavella Edwards, really likes to sling it. But maybe that's not what Texas needs to win a national championship this year. Maybe they need to play great defense. Maybe they need to hold on to the football and keep it from away from the other team. Manning can run, and that would serve Texas moving forward. But like they got to figure out a way to get the most out of his five-star talent. What so many people don't really get their heads around is like Manning did not play the highest level of comp of high school football in Louisiana. He played at Isidore Neiman, a private Catholic school in private school in New Orleans. Wasn't going up against the best competition. I mean, this is a school that like his uncles went to, and when his grandfather played for the Saints, Odell Beckham Jr. played for this school too. Probably because his dad's a U played started at LSU back in the day. The point is, like, the more live reps Arch Manning gets against Power Four competition in the SEC, the better I think he'll do. But there's a lot of really talented players in the SEC at all 16 institutions. From the Georgias and Texas at the top to the Kentuckys and Mississippi States at the bottom. There's dudes everywhere. And I think Texas plays Ohio State this season. That could be a challenge for the Longhorns too. So maybe their win total might be reflected as such. But for the most part, I will say though that Arch Manning is going to get better as the year progresses. But again, he's got to approach 30 career starts for him to ever achieve all he can at the college game. I wrote about this for fansided.com in lieu of Cooper Manning going on Dan Patrick and talking about this. Do I think Texas is going to win a national title with Arch Manning as their quarterback? I mean, it'd be a shame not to. I mean, he's going to be there for at least 2 years, maybe three. And if you don't win a national title with Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian as your head coach, then you missed the boat. I mean, maybe Georgia gets another one, maybe Ohio State gets one. But if you're not getting one in Clemson or somebody else, like Oregon gets every, then you failed. And that's the expectation. That's the only thing that really matters for Texas. As far as is he going to win a Heisman Trophy? I mean, his uncles and grandfather never did, so why think that that's going to be the case? More often than not, the guys who win the Heisman Trophy kind of not necessarily come out of nowhere, but like they take college football by storm. It's not always the guy with the best odds to start the year. We thought Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck were going to do it. They weren't even close. I mean, Travis Hunter was probably near the top. Again, I wouldn't have voted for him. I think you got to make the playoff. I think that that's just kind of prerequisite for me. So I would have given it to Ashton Genty, but I would have still had like Travis Hunter on my ballot if I would have been voting. But again, like that's not what it's about. As far as if Manning is going to be the number one overall pick in 27 or 28, that's the goal. I mean, his uncles were. His grandfather was the number two overall pick behind Jim Plunkett in 71 by the Saints. So I'm saying like for that to happen, he's got to become a better passer because like otherwise you need to play tight end. I mean, I'm not asking for him to change positions. Like some morons out there asking for Jalen Miller to change positions. That's stupid. But Manning is a quarterback, and if you're going to be a quarterback in the NFL with that last name, you got to be able to throw the football with conviction. Maybe he will. Maybe he has that in him. Maybe he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But we got to pump the brakes here a little bit. And I will say this: his dad goes on there talking about it on Dan Patrick. He says, like, look, we love to build somebody up and then tear them down. But like you can't have it both ways. Like you can't be accepting infinite praise and denying infinite ridicule. Like if and I'm in the business of covering sports, if someone does well, I'll talk about it. If someone doesn't, I'll talk about it as well. I'm more I push back more on like really bad general managers than anything else because they're in an elevator, they're in an office position, they're not being asked to deal with injuries, they're not being asked to deal with personalities and managing a locker room. They got to build a roster. And if they can't do that, then somebody else needs to do it. Ownership, the same sort of thing. You're lucky to have that opportunity. And then if you're squandering it, get somebody else who's actually going to care and try. But, I appreciate Cooper Manning going on Dan Patrick and saying, like, he's my son, I got to protect him. But he also went on Dan Patrick, so you can't have it both ways. You are the first family of football. It's different territory. Arch Manning didn't sign up for this. This is just his lot in life. So if we're going to be giving him NIL valuations over $6 million or something ridiculous, you need to go out there and play. I do think he gets better in his first year as a starter, but this is not the year that he's going to be getting all the accolades and everything like that. I still think Texas is going to make the playoff. Maybe they win the playoff, but right now I would venture to guess that like there will be growing pains in his first year as a starter. Why would they not? Moving on to our next topic here, we're going to go on to some playoffs. You kidding me? My personal hero, Andy Staples of On3, formerly of The Athletic, formerly of Sports Illustrated, released his way too early college football playoff bracket for 2025. Um, there's a lot of stuff on here to unpack, so I'm just going to rattle off the 12 teams he has here, talk about where I differ in some capacities, what I like about it, what I don't like, and we'll get on with our lives. So, number one, he's got Texas winning the SEC. Number two, he's got Oregon winning the Big Ten. Number three, he's got Clemson winning the ACC. Number four, he's got BYU winning the Big 12. So your Power Four champions get the four first round buys. Number five, he's got Ohio State as the Big Ten runner-up. Six, he's got Notre Dame as a national independent. Seven, he's got Penn State as a Big Ten at-large. At eight, he's got Georgia as the projected SEC runner-up. At nine, he's got Illinois as a Big Ten at-large. At 10, he's got South Carolina as an SEC at-large. At 11, he's got Florida as an SEC at-large. And at 12, he's got Tulane winning the American in the group of five. So of the 12 teams he has in the playoff field, I have eight. The seven teams that are returning and South Carolina. So we agree on Texas, Oregon, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Georgia, and South Carolina making it. Where he has them slotted, I'm not really going to fault anybody there. I think it's about getting the 12 teams more than like the positioning. So I'm good with that. Again, I'm very high on South Carolina this upcoming season. This is the team that Andy Staples rooted for as a child prior to going to Florida and playing for Steve Spurrier very briefly before getting into hard-hitting journalism. So yeah, he's got the two teams he cares probably the most about in there as well. So looking at this, probably the three things that I have the biggest beef with are as such. Uh, I think number one, I think having Illinois in right now is a bit rich. Could Illinois be the fourth best team in the Big Ten? I think it's possible. Brett Bielema's a hell of a coach. Luke Altmaier's back at quarterback. The Illini really turned it on in the second half of last year. Got a bit of a winning streak here. Maybe they replace the Indiana Hoosiers for that spot. I think that's in the realm of possibility. But like Illinois just doesn't. That's the one team up here that just doesn't fit. They haven't been consistently as good. They're not recruiting at SEC level or a big high Big Ten level. They've not been, as well known in the playoff sphere of late as Tulane has, winning the group of five a couple of times or being right there in the American. Um, Illinois could do it, but like, in a bizarre, I had them winning the Big Ten as the four seed in a bizarre world exercise here. Again, that's a bizarre world, and this is maybe we are living in a bizarre world in some capacities. I would have Illinois probably very comfortably inside the top 20. We'll see what happens, but like I'm not ready to be as bullish on the Illini as Andy Staples or really anybody else is at this point. It remains to be seen how I feel about them, but that it just seems weird seeing them in the top 10, particularly as the fourth Big Ten at-large team. For the record, I think the Big Ten only gets three teams in. So I guess, yeah, again, for like the four teams that I have differently than Andy Staples, I do not have BYU winning the Big 12 or Tulane winning the American, or maybe they have to win the American, but they're not making the playoffs. So I've got Iowa State winning the Big 12. I've got Miami, Ohio winning the group of five. And then my two other at-larges that Andy Staples did not have are Tennessee and Arizona State. So that's kind of where I'm leaning there. The next one I would say is the Tulane bit of it all. I'm not right. I'm not there to I'm not ready to crown Tulane just yet. This is a team that I think could have made the playoff a year ago, but I think the dirty little secret is I think John Summerall was on the verge of getting poached to be a head coach at, West Virginia, North Carolina, UCF, Purdue, think jobs of that nature. He is a Kentucky alum. He is a guy that I think would replace Mark Stoops if he were to be ousted at some point. John Summerall is one of my favorite coaches in the sport, but I feel like once his name started getting floated out there, saw Tulane kind of backslide a bit. Didn't win the American, and then they go and they get stomped by Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl. Maybe Tulane has enough infrastructure. Also losing Darian Minster to Duke, that doesn't help. It's Ty Thompson, kind of more of a name than a player at this point, quarterback. I just think that there's better teams out there in the group of five that can actually contend. My pick is Miami, Ohio, because they got DeQuan Finn, former Toledo star who was at Baylor last year, coming back to the MAC. Chuck Barton's a fantastic head coach. Why not the MAC? Be fun. I think James Madison's going to be really good. They got Matthew Sluka coming over from UNLV. He's going to reunite with Bob Chesney. That's a well-run program that everybody seems to win at, no matter who the head coach is. Bob Chesney, Kurt Signetti, Mike Houston, etc. That's kind of what JMU is all about. I also like Colorado State a lot next year. Navy's going to be good. I don't know if App State's going to be there, but like there's a handful of other teams out there that I think I'd like more than Tulane. But then again, I picked Liberty to win the Group of Five last year, and the Flames flamed out. So what do I know? But I'm not ready to put Tulane in that category as everybody else. It could be them, but like I could see myself quickly pivoting to Tulane being my pick to win the Group of Five early next season. I just don't see myself putting them in the top 12 right now. But any Staples did, and that's fine. I don't think that's outlandish. I think the one thing that I had probably the biggest gripe with is actually his last two at-large SEC teams. Again, I'm okay with South Carolina in because I have them in. And I'm okay if he's high in Florida, his team, his alma mater. I think Florida's going to be really good. I'll talk about Florida later. But I can't definitively have the Gators and the Gamecocks both in over Tennessee. Like right now, I think the SEC is going to get four teams in. Texas is a lock. Georgia's almost is. I'm really high on Tennessee. I understand that Nico Maliava may not be the guy. I understand that Josh Heupel may be limited as a head coach from a schematic sort of standpoint. But I think, like in a lot of ways, Tennessee just is more steady. I trust them to win 9 games more than I do Florida, maybe even more so than South Carolina. And again, like I have Tennessee, I have South Carolina, and I have Texas and Georgia making it out of the SEC. Maybe I'm just higher on Tennessee than Florida. They got to play each other, and we'll see what happens. But I just don't think you can have both of them in over Tennessee. And honestly, Florida, like maybe they get in, but like I think Ole Miss can't be that bad. We'll see what happens with LSU. A&M could be trending up. There could maybe Oklahoma turns it all around. I don't know. But again, like I just don't see that being the teams that I would have in over Tennessee. Maybe South Carolina, maybe Florida, but like Tennessee's got to be in over them. And I could be wrong here, but that's kind of how I'm feeling there with Andy Staples is way too early college football playoff field. And again, I appreciate the effort. I appreciate putting something out there distracting from a Super Bowl that I don't care about. Andy Staples is comfortable with being wrong. You know, he does ass clown rankings. Like that's what he does sometimes. Andy Staples show, whatever the clown part is. I and I think like this is something just to put out there and have conversations, you know, because we're college football fans and we care a lot about this and we want to get ourselves through a very long, arduous off season. But like again, maybe this ends up being the right bracket. Maybe this is what mine ends up looking like, you know, heading into week 0 when we do our preview shows, you know, our first full year on video, if you will, with fall start. But I don't know. I just I think it's okay that he's got some like truly wacky inclusions here. It's that part of the year where like that's okay because like what do we really know? Again, we're probably basing our brackets a lot on what we saw last year, but we have to remember that people graduate, coaches leave, players get hurt, players improve. So like it will look vastly different than this at the end of the day. But I think for the most part, with a 12-team playoff, like we're going to be getting it more right and right with each passing year. I think there's just programs out there like Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, Clemson, ones like that where like they just have too much positive momentum to really slow down and be out of the playoff next year. Not saying all of them will, but more likely than not, they'll probably be in. But God, I'd be wild if Illinois made it. That would be absolutely utterly insane. Moving on to our fourth topic here, we're going to pat the dock a little bit with something that my home state, Georgia, just put out there into the state Senate. Georgia is going to introduce a bill that prevents NIL compensation from being subjected to the state income tax. Look, I think a lot of people look at this and they're going to be like, oh, this just helps Kirby Smart in recruitment. Yes, but it's way more than that. This helps Brent Key in recruitment. This helps Del McGee. This helps Clay Helton. This helps Jerry Mack now taking over at Kennesaw State. Um, what you have to remember is Georgia competes in the same region of states that don't have income tax, such as Florida, Texas, and Tennessee. And look, I know those flagship schools are all in the SEC and they compete with Georgia. Texas A&M and Vanderbilt are also in those schools as well. And then if you look at Georgia Tech, I mean, they compete in the same conference as Miami and Florida State. And then obviously, you know, Georgia State and Georgia Southern compete in the Sun Belt, and Kennesaw State's in CUSA. And there's probably schools from those states and other non-state income state taxes states. Yeah, that was a little bit of a tongue twister that compete in their leagues. So if this legislation from Governor Kemp and the state Senate like puts forth opportunities to give these programs and these schools leg up on being able to retain the best players, then that's huge for them. Then that makes the universities better, the athletic programs better. It builds on itself because it'd be silly to lose out on a homegrown product because somebody in Texas is going to drill oil and give them a ridiculous NIL compensation for them to go 8-4 when they could have gone 11-1 at Georgia. Like it's silly. It's absolutely ridiculous. I also read somewhere that Kirby Smart was kind of doing some like old school recruiting tactics, like getting guys to take less. Now that he's got this ability in his war chest, Georgia already recruits at a top 5 level. The national championships will keep on coming. I don't know if he's going to repeat. I don't know if it's going to be next year, but like he's not done. As long as he still recruits at a high level, as long as he's still passionate about this and the players and everything like that, then he'll continue to have success. But I also think that this helps Brent Key eventually get Georgia Tech into the playoff. I think this opens up the door for if Clay Helton really finds it within the Sun Belt and they win the Sun Belt with Georgia Southern, maybe they make it in as group of 5. We'll see what happens with Del McGee there in year 2 at Georgia State. They did beat Vanderbilt, but they didn't win a lot of other games. And then obviously Kennesaw State won a lot at a previous level, had a really rough year, first year at FBS. We'll see what happens there, but you know, Kennesaw's in the Metro Atlanta area. There's a lot of businesses out there. Uh, it serves them to use student athletes to their advantage to build brands and stuff like that. People in this region are really excited about football and college athletics. And again, this makes me really excited to be a Georgian because like this just shows that like when it comes to some business areas, there is some progression here, and I like that. I'll add this before I kind of move on to the next topic here with this abbreviated episode. Really, the big thing, the best thing that George has ever done in my lifetime was the introduction of the Hope Scholarship in the early 90s. If you had a 3.0 GPA in high school or better, your tuition's essentially cut in half in college. If you go to a state school, I think there's advantages with like room and board and whatnot. I think this also helps fund pre-K programs as well. Um, it's done wonders for the state universities across the board. I mean, Georgia wasn't that great of a school back when Herschel Walker was running football. It was really difficult to get into when I applied for college, and it's impossible now. Like, you need to be like a 4.0 student and live in either the metro Atlanta area or Macon Warner Robins or be the valedictorian of your high school class to go to Georgia. That's essentially what it takes at this point to get in. But like it's the same sort of thing with Nick Saban being the head coach at Alabama. It added a cool factor. It had people that wanted to go to school from all over the place to be at Alabama. And as a result, it helped raise the academic standards at Alabama to being very respectable from where it was kind of like you could have a triple digit SAT score and get in when I was in high school. A lot's changed in about 20 years. Um, but I would say for the most part, like college athletics are a way that people connect to, their alma maters or their programs. Like they're on TV. You can watch any number of teams. Like, this looks fun. I want to go to school here. As a perspective, you know, about high school senior looking for a place to go to college. If it's cool to stay in state, then that's wonderful as well. But like don't sleep on the power of sports teams. I think this is a lot of like I'm never gonna have to explain where I went to school. I could just say Georgia, and everybody that anywhere I'm applying or anybody would know that. Oh, Georgia football. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm a business major. Don't really use that very much with my job now. I just write sports takes, but like most of my attachment to University of Georgia revolves around Georgia football, the fraternity I joined in downtown Athens. That's really what I think about with the Classic City in my time at the University of Georgia. So, this may be a way to keep people like Carson Beck from leaving for God knows how much money at Miami. But then again, he's from Jacksonville. He seems to be into that kind of sort of stuff. So best of luck to him. But God, it'd be a real shame to lose somebody to like Texas A&M for no reason. Like if you can put forth fair compensation. And again, this bill helps Georgia out, but it also helps Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Kennesaw State, and countless of other programs across the board. This makes a lot of sense because like anything with NIL, anything with student athletes, they can make it so that like they can take advantage of the opportunities that they have because I mean they can't have a job otherwise. The the requirement of having like 20 hours worth of practice and stuff a week, like you can't have a regular job and be a college student. It's just too hard. It's not easy. But I would say though, for the most part, like this is good and it makes me really proud to be where I'm from. Moving on to, I believe, our penultimate topic here. Let's go with some I saw the line. I'm gonna look at some way too early over under win totals from FanDuel. I think they put out about 20, or at least that's the 20 that on three curated. So I'm gonna rattle them off. I had 10 teams that I had picked the over and 10 I picked the under. So I had Notre Dame under 10 and a half, Ohio State over 10 and a half, Oregon under 10 and a half, Penn State over 10 and a half, Clemson over 9 and a half, Georgia over 9 and a half, Tennessee over 9 and a half, Texas over 9 and a half, Alabama over 8 and a half, Indiana under 8 and a half, Louisville over 8 and a half, LSU under 8 and a half, Miami under 8 and a half, Michigan under 8 and a half, Kansas under 7 and a half, North Carolina under 7 and a half, USC under 7 and a half, Colorado under 6 and a half, Florida over 6 and a half, and Iowa over 6 and a half. So the 10 schools that I had the over on were Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, Louisville, Florida, and Iowa. I realize there's a lot of SEC teams there, but I have my reasons for that. And then the 10 teams I had under were Notre Dame, Oregon, Indiana, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Kansas, North Carolina, USC, and Colorado. Of those 20 teams, the easiest over, the best bet on the board is Florida over 6.5. That team's going to win about 8 games. I'm not saying that they're going to definitively beat Georgia in the cocktail party, but that's within the realm of possibility. I understand that Billy Napier is betting on himself as the OC, but this is all about getting the most out of DJ Lagway. If he does that, Florida navigates a tough schedule. I don't think anybody wants to play them. Florida does trend up here. Napier can kind of be a little bit of an idiot sometimes with in-game execution, but like he seems to have a better pulse on his team than he did a year ago, and I think it works out for him this year. It's good to bet on yourself because you got to believe in yourself before anybody else believes in you. Easiest under has got to be North Carolina at 7.5. Look, just because Bill Belichick's the head coach there doesn't mean that North Carolina is going to be gangbusters in year one under him. He's got to learn the college game. He's got to get a quarterback. And North Carolina was kind of in a weird spot under Mac Brown at the end there. I think people are going to be voting this up because Belichick's the head coach. It kind of feels like a sucker bet to take North Carolina over 7.5. I think they'll be like a bowl team. They'll probably be win about 6 games, but like, got to give it time. Let's not be overly bullish on them with that. So that's kind of my easiest over and easiest under. Some of these were challenging. I think Alabama at 8.5 was very difficult. I ended up going with the over because Ryan Grubb is coming in to be the offensive coordinator. They are still going to retain Nick Sheridan. They're still going to retain Jamarcus Shepard on staff, but I'm also kind of nervous about Kalen DeBoer trying to win with his kind of guys, which means Washington players versus Alabama players. You can win the Pac-12 with Washington players. You can't win the SEC with Washington players. And I don't know if Alabama's going to make the playoff. I don't think a lot of people are really that high on them next year. But I will say though, like, look, I think the Crimson Tide beat Oklahoma next year. Then they beat Vanderbilt, but they don't beat. I mean, we'll see what happens in Tennessee, but like they don't beat South Carolina or they don't beat Georgia again. You get what I'm saying. Like they're going to roughly be the same sort of team that they were a year ago. Maybe they'll be a little bit better defensively if it's in their blood to do that. Then I think that bodes well for them. But like I'll go back and forth in Alabama. I will say though, I don't think Alabama is making the playoff next year. And if they don't make it in the first 3 years of Kalen DeBoer as head coach, there's a chance they may run him out of town. And Alabama goes back to kind of being what they were during my formative years before I went to college, just kind of blah. But they've got a ton of resources. They've got a ton of passion. I still think they're very relatively unified. I just kind of wonder if like DeBoer is really ready for what this is. We'll see what happens, but that was the hardest one for me to pick. Looking at a few other ones before I move on to like our last topic here with this abbreviated show. Um, LSU under 8.5. That felt weird, but like I have a feeling that they might turn on Brian Kelly this year. A lot of people are high on Garrett Nussmeier. I'm kind of lukewarm. He's kind of more of an idea of a quarterback than a really great one. He could be the first overall pick. He could be playing for the Saints next year. Could play for the team. Be the first quarterback the Saints took in the first round since Archie Manning back at 71. Uh, but also like LSU's defense was horrible. And I think Marcus Freeman having a lot of success there at Notre Dame really makes him look bad. We'll see what happens. Maybe LSU just has way too much variance. I mean, they could win the SEC. They could also win 7 games. So maybe 8 wins is the right number there, but again, I'm not that high at LSU. I think looking across the board, really like Clemson over. I think that like they won the ACC in a down year. Cade Klubnik's back. Garrett Riley is going to be calling the offensive plays again. Getting Tom Allen to replace Wes Goodwin as defensive coordinator, that's huge. I don't know if you beat South Carolina, but like that won't matter. You can still get to the ACC championship game with a really good chance of repeating if you make it there. I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. And then as far as like other ones on here, Maybe Kansas really levels up a little bit as well. But I kind of feel that like for the most part, my phone's doing something dumb. I just kind of feel that like the Big Ten outside of Ohio State and Penn State, like it's going to pull back a little bit. I maybe jumped around right there. I don't really care. I do think that like the soft middle belly of the Big Ten's propping the best teams up considerably. I do think that league is a little more competitive top to bottom. We'll see what Washington does. We'll see if Michigan State levels up. We'll see what happens with the Illinois and the Nebraskas in the world. But again, I'm not really ready to crown Michigan just yet. I think Oregon pulls back a little bit too. I think that like quarterback play maybe knocks them down to 10 wins as opposed to 12. So yeah, I think that this is interesting. Again, I didn't look at really any of the schedules. I'm just kind of going off memory of who I think that they might play. It was very interesting that like I was able to get 10 teams over and 10 teams under pretty easily. Didn't I have to goose it anyway? Just that's just naturally what it is. And I think for the most part, as I'm like looking at these teams, like these win totals, like I'm like just barely on one side or the other. Like I like Georgia to win 10 games as opposed to nine. Or, I like what's another one on here? I like LSU to win 8 games as opposed to nine. Or I like Ohio State to win 11 versus 10. Maybe I like Notre Dame to win 10 more versus 11. This is really close. This is all about getting both sides, getting enough money on both sides to make the bet even. That's what all Vegas cares about. But I look at those teams, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas. Like I have them all in as the playoff teams. It's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. It's pretty easy. I kind of wonder why Andy Staples didn't have Tennessee in. Maybe he's really down on them. I mean, he's got Florida winning. I guess he's got to have Florida winning more than 6.5 games. So that's neither here nor there. And you know what? Let's move on to our last topic here. Let's move on to some good bowl. Biff Poggi is going to return to Michigan after failing as Charlotte's head coach in some sort of assistant role. This was Jim Harbaugh's right-hand man for a couple of years. He first got connected with the Harbaughs, coaching high school football in Maryland. Again, Jim Harbaugh's older brother, John Harbaugh, longtime head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, the same state as where Biff Poggi is from. I think it's good bringing back a guy who's, doesn't wear sleeves, just kind of looks a little sloppy out there. His name is Biff. He's more of a former financial guy, probably had like a 2.3 GPA in high school. Just a very interesting character. Yeah, it's weird. He was the first head coach hired in his cycle, and he didn't even make it through 2 years. I think Charlotte switching conferences didn't help. I also kind of feel that like I don't even know who Charlotte's head coach is. I don't really care, to be honest with you. We'll see what happens. But like Biff Poggi was just kind of a very unique personality, and he was kind of Jim Harbaugh's right-hand man there. He kind of provided some sort of like consultants, some sort of guidance, if you will, when it comes to helping Michigan finally win a national championship. He won a lot in high school football, but it's college football, and this is different. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword in some capacities with him taking a role on Sharon Moore's staff. I think he smooths out some of the edges that maybe cause some issues for Sharon Moore in year one as the head coach at Michigan. But I also kind of feel like this is kind of more of like, is this really Sharon Moore's team or is this just Jim Harbaugh's team? And maybe that's what Sharon Moore wants, but I don't think he's going to be able to win national titles until this is definitively his team. Again, this is what hurts a lot of head coaches who are promoted from within replacing a so-called legend. They try to do things to the T of their predecessor, and it's not authentic because it's not them. Sherrod Moore, I think, does have some stuff that's different from Jim Harbaugh, and that's to the boon of Michigan long term. And maybe Biff Poggi it just makes sense for it to have him back in the building. Maybe kind of explain, where did Michigan kind of go wrong this past year? What can be corrected? And what's just going to be different now that it's a new regime? I can get behind that. But I guess just for like the most part is like this does make Michigan a little more likable, even though they're not because they cheat. And or at least they've been dealing with sanctions and stuff for a while. They're out there. Um, Again, like I'm not the biggest fan of them or Big Ten football in general, but an SEC guy. This is what I'm all about. I mean, heck, got a Georgia thing here, Hines Ward behind me, Georgia. That's kind of what about. Obviously, two more Georgia things you can't see further up there. But like I will be objective about this. Biff Poggi back to Michigan is relevant. It does matter, and it does make Michigan better. In the short term, I don't know how much it's going to help them in the long term, but it's certainly a hiring that I can get behind for the time being. I did find it odd that he was able to be, hired to be a head coach at Charlotte. I guess they owed it themselves to try, but Charlotte does not have the resources of other teams in the American. I mean, it's a brand new football program for the most part. I mean, it wasn't really around when I was in college. So like they're still trying to figure out what they are as a football brand. And I think like, you're going into the American and you got to compete against teams like Memphis and Tulane. Army and Navy have a lot more tradition than you, a lot more resources, a lot more experience. Like, this isn't John Summerall's first radio. This isn't Ryan Silverfield's first radio either. This isn't Jeff Traylor's first radio. It clearly was Bill Poggi's first and only radio as a or a group of five head coach. But going to a Power Four program in a role that he's probably overqualified for, that does help Michigan. And I think that's an advantage for programs like Michigan, where like they get people to come in here who have been cast off by other programs. They come in, they explain some of their failures. It kind of elevates the whole entire operation. I do think in a way that Biff Poggi failing as a college head coach will help Sharon Moore learn, vicariously through Poggi's mistakes as opposed to taking it on the chin every step of the way. Again, I am pulling for Sharon Moore to come out of this on top. I do think that eventually he will get Michigan to the playoff. We'll see if they can win a national title under him. I don't know if it's going to be with Poggi on staff, but like for the most part, I think that this is a good idea, and I think this is a move that Michigan should be happy about and celebrate. This was episode 148 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118, 118, 118, not 1810, 118, 118. Yes. I'm talking a lot. I'm losing my voice a little bit. That's how it goes. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams, at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Be sure to give us a 5-star review. Yes, last time I did it right down here, the post production it kind of blocked off. So you're like, what's his hand doing here? But yeah, anything you give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts is a huge help. Getting a lot of people all over the world listening to the show. You got people from Australia, you got people from Paris, we got people from Georgia, New Mexico, California, Arkansas, New York, Pennsylvania, Alabama. Had people listen to it from Singapore. It's the show is starting to grow, and I can't believe that this silly college football show does it for you. And I'm happy. I felt that there was a niche out there that wasn't being exploited, and I felt that Cody Williams and I are really funny, and we have a really good rapport. Obviously, when we do solo shows, it's a little bit different because you're just talking to yourself and trying not to stumble over your words or cough as much throughout the entire process. But we're still having fun. But yeah, Cody will be back on the show on Monday. It's probably going to be Parks and Rec themed. If not, we'll kick that back to Thursday, and we may be having some graphic design is my passion returning. I've leveled up there. I'm become really proficient at the sticker mule. Yeah, that was the new thing that I found on there. So it's going to be great. And yeah, be sure to have fun this weekend. If you want to watch Super Bowl, great. If not, who cares? You can watch Kendrick Lamar. Who cares? Whatever. But yeah, this is the heart of the off season. This is kind of when I feel that I'm at my best. Necessity is the mother of invention. I get to think and be even more creative, have more fun, interesting, and wild takes out here. But once again, thanks for listening. And this is False Start.